I started working for Jeremy, it was back in 2014, and we were just in a little office in Parliament, and he was still a backbencher. And I never thought that just a few years later, me and Jeremy would be coming here to my hometown in front of thousands of people, and on the verge of a Labour government, and that I would be welcoming him on the stage. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome the leader of the Labour Party and the next Prime Minister of a socialist Britain, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your enthusiasm. We're a party that starts our conference with an open-air rally of music, of speeches, of people coming together. Do you know why? Because we believe in music and creativity as well as the ideas for the future. And I want to say a big thank you to all of you for the support you give to Labour, the support you gave in the general election last year, and the support that I personally have had during a lot of attacks from the mainstream media. Thank you very much. But I tell you what, the more those people come after us, the stronger we are. But think of it another way as well. Yes, we're put under pressure. Yes, there are people critical and attacking and so on. And we can use our platforms to argue back and to fight back. But there are many in society that don't have that chance. They have to make very tough choices. To pay the rent or buy the food, to live somewhere or have nowhere to live, to give up a job to care for somebody because there's no social care available. What is wrong in this country is the injustice, the inequality and the poverty that is created by this system and this Tory government and the austerity that they've put onto us since 2010. And you'll remember this very well, and it's not that long ago. Last year, April, the Prime Minister decided to call a general election because she was thinking she could win the election, and you remember all the stuff that went with it. And you remember what all those commentators said about Labour, about us, and so on. Something happened. That something was that we, our party, the Labour Party, offered an alternative of redistribution of wealth and of power, of transforming our society and transforming our economy. And said we weren't interested in Me Tooism in politics. Our job, our function, our purpose, our movement is to represent those people who are hardest done by in our society, and that's what we're here for. And in this fantastic city of Liverpool, the history of music, the history of struggle, the history of standing up. The last time I spoke at a rally on the pier head was to oppose racism on this very platform a few years ago. We marched together because we are never going to allow the racists to divide us in our society. So we stand together with those people in Central Europe and other places who are standing up to the rise of the far right. Because think about it. You can divide a society. You can find a minority to blame. That's what happened in the 1920s and 1930s. You find a minority to blame. you then create a hatred towards those people, and then you create a hatred towards somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. But at the end of it, you've created a very nasty, oppressive atmosphere. You've not built one house, you've not built one school, you've not trained one doctor, you have not achieved anything by that. So we will not allow anyone to divide us. Our movement is about bringing people together. Bringing people together to defend jobs, bringing people together to defend living standards, bringing people together for an investment-led future that John McDonnell outlined to you a few minutes ago, because that is what the Labour way is about. Now then, you look at what's happening in so many different parts of this country. Austerity since 2010 has driven another 400,000 children into poverty, has forced head teachers in schools to make awful decisions. Do they cut a subject in the secondary school? Do they get rid of a teacher? Do they sell some land? That doesn't help our young people's education. Their underfunded health service thinks, in some cases, they can close the funding gap by selling off building and selling off land. No, the answer has to be this. Look at the levels of inequality in our society. The growing numbers of poor people, the growing numbers of poor children, the growing numbers of rough sleeping homeless. Then look at the other end. Those that put their money into tax havens and take the profit from those tax havens, those that have fleeced and ripped off our public sector by privatisation of energy and privatisation of water. I just say to everyone, think of how we can do things differently. A Labour government coming into office committed to ending the gender pay gap, committed to closing the income gap, committed to bringing water into public ownership, bringing mail into public ownership, bringing rail into public ownership. And I tell you what, we're not stopping there, because it's about democracy as well. We're not going to create great corporations with some distant executive way up there and the rest just putting up with it. We want people to be empowered in their daily lives. That means democracy in the running of those industries. It means democracy in the running, yes, of our newspapers, and it also means democracy at the workplace. How many people working in offices, in factories, in all kinds of different places know a great deal, have great ideas of what could be done, what could be made, what could be achieved, how services could be delivered, and are just ignored by those who are interested in the financial advantage of asset stripping rather than the investment advances for the rest of us. I know which side I'm on. I know what I want our government, and it'll be our government to achieve when we've won a general election. And so, the last election, we put together a wonderful manifesto for the many, not the few. And it was a great document. But we also need to develop many of those ideas that are in it, develop the principle of the National Education Service, education free from cradle to grave for all of us as a benefit to the individual and the community. But also an education system that doesn't ignore those who are not the greatest achievers at 13 and 14, who get pushed on one side. We are there for every child, for every student, for every person. Because there is a strength in supporting each other. It creates that cohesion in society. How do you think the vote was first won? How do you think the National Health Service came about? How do you think the principles of free school education came about? By popular action and popular struggle. Women won the right to vote, not just because Parliament voted for it. They won the right to vote because of the actions of the suffragettes and many others in demanding that right to vote. And just down here, there's the Slavery Museum, which I went to this morning. And at one level, yes, slavery was made illegal, was abolished by actions in Parliament when Wilberforce put before his bill to Parliament to achieve it. That's true. But before that, in this country, the Reverend Thomas Clarkson toured the whole country campaigning against the slave trade. And in this very town, later on, J.D. Morrell saw the injustice and the horrors of what was going on in the Congo. But what really ended the slave trade was the uprising of slaves against their oppression. We have to hear the voice of those that are oppressed and stand with them. And so it's an understanding of history that I want to see developed in our party, in our education system, and in our society. And an understanding of the world that we live in. Environmental sustainability, the need to protect the diversity, the biodiversity, and the ecosystems, and ensure our rivers, like the Mersey, are clean, our water is clean, and our air is clean. You can't achieve all these things if you're wedded and bowed down before the principles of a free market economy. It simply doesn't happen like that. And so, our policies are all of those things that I've outlined, and all of the things that you will outline as well, because that's what brings us together and makes us strong. Now we've got big issues coming up in Parliament in the near future. We will challenge this government on whatever deal it brings back, on our 6 tests, on jobs, on living standards, on environmental protection and protection of those jobs, and the ability of an incoming Labour government to invest and intervene in an economy to bring about decent wages, jobs and full employment. And if this government can't deliver, then I simply say to Theresa May, the best way to settle this is by having a general election. And we will take our message out, to every town, every city, every village. But it's also about how we do that. This party is bigger than ever. We are the biggest political party in Europe. We've got more members than all the other parties put together. And in that massive membership, we have all that creativity and all those ideas. But we also have the ability to take our message directly out through social media, through door knocking, through community campaigns, through our community organising, so that we do gain those marginal constituencies we've got to win. But above all, we mobilise people into the idea of the kind of society we can live in rather than the kind of society we are told to live in. And I am determined that this party will come out of this conference even bigger, more democratic, more involved of all its members, and above all, absolutely, totally determined to win an election in order to reduce the gap between the richest and the poorest, to create a society where we do not pass by on the other side to somebody suffering from mental illness, somebody suffering because they've got nowhere to live, a child unable to study in school because they haven't been properly fed, and a government that will act on the world stage, not to go to war, but act on the world stage to defend human rights, democracy, and be a voice for peace around the world. That is why those great people that founded our movement, those great people that struggled against enormous odds in the last 2 centuries to bring about the kind of strength and organisation that we've got in trade unions and in the Labour Party, brought all those things possible for us. Now, my friends, let's dedicate ourselves absolutely to taking that message, decency, justice, socialism, out there on the streets all around this country, and say to the Tories, We are many, you are few. We are for the many, you are for the few. That is why Labour is so strong. That is why Liverpool is so strong for Labour. That is why that fantastic creative energy that's here in Liverpool and here around this country can be unleashed by Labour. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your support for Labour.